Hi, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I have a client who's asking me how to move her text from a Word document into Artisan 6, and further, what happens if it doesn't fit. It works pretty seamlessly moving it from one program into the other, but I thought let's take this a little bit further because a lot of times you've got embellishments that you want to work your text around, you've got photographs that might be in the way. So I've learned a technique that I want to share with you today where I can make my journal box do exactly what I want it to do. So that's what I want to especially highlight today. So why don't we go to my desktop, let me show you how to do this. And before I forget, if you haven't subscribed to this channel, I encourage you to click the subscribe button. What happens is YouTube will alert you whenever I post a new video. And I appreciate everybody who's helping me grow this channel by subscribing. Thank you so much. Welcome to my desktop. This is a page where I just chose some random photos from our trip to Myrtle Beach just to give you an idea of how you can add text to your page and how you can change the shape of text to your page. Typically speaking, on a page, I would have a title and dates. I will add embellishments to it, but this is going to be really simplistic just for the sake of showing you some different techniques that you might think about. If I was just journaling a few things, I would just create a journal box on here and type it up. I tend to do a lot more journaling today than I did when I first started almost 28 years ago. I like to tell the whole story. I like to include some historical background or how I feel or people we met, just whatever memories I want to remember down the road. Because it's amazing how quickly we forget things. So sometimes it's nice to look back on something and just kind of relive some of those memories that you just don't think about 4 or 5 years later, 20 years later, they just fade, So what I will do at the beginning of the year is I will start a Word document. I'll title it, 2023 album, 2022, whatever. I put in all of the months and I'll include anything that I know in advance that's going to happen that year, anniversaries, birthdays, things like that. Things that I know already in advance will probably be included in my book. So when I'm thinking about something, I'll come in here and I'll do some journaling. It doesn't matter when I get to the book. It could be years from now, heaven forbid, but it has happened in my life where it took me 4 years to get a book started. But I was so glad that I went in and wrote down the stories because I was shocked at how much I forgot in 4 years. But having them already written, I was reliving it over and over again. When I think I'm happy with it, then what I will do, and this is from our trip to Myrtle Beach, I will just highlight it. Personally, I like to right click. You can always do Control C, C as in copy. And then when you go over to Artisan, Control V as in Victor for paste, or just right click, copy. You can go into Artisan. Under the Insert tab, I'm going to choose text. And I'm just going to throw in a basic journal box. And I'm going to go ahead and make it kind of close to, let's just put it all the way next to my photo there. Make it a little bit bigger. When I'm happy with it, create, open it by clicking one more time. I'm going to right click, paste. Now that looks a lot smaller on the page for what I'm trying to accomplish here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to paste it a second time just so I have more text so you can see what's happening here. I'm going to click OK. So the text is in front of his face. Obviously, we don't want that. And my text box goes right up to the edge of this photo. I don't really want that either. So I'm going to right click on my text box. It's just easier for me. I want to unlock the aspect ratio. It by default will be locked. I find it's easier for me if I just want to make something a little bit narrower, but I don't want to make it shorter. If I kept the aspect ratio locked when I push this over, see how it's getting shorter? I don't want that. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to unlock the aspect ratio. Now it's going to say just the right height, but I'm going to make it a little bit narrower so I have a little bit of a space between this photograph and the text box, but it's still over his face. You could conceivably do 3 different text boxes here because there's different shapes. This one would be wider than this one. I find that it's kind of a pain because on the one hand, it will keep it into exactly the shape you want it to be. But if you were to take some text out of here, then all of a sudden this text box is shorter and you got to take some of the text out, copy it out of here and put it in here. It's just easier for me to have everything in one big text box. So if I go into this photograph, by the way, I have these locked because I don't want the photographs to move. I want them to stay where they are. But I can do the drop-down menu, go to properties, and I can alter a few things. Like I can say, I want the text wrapping to be around the bounding box. Since this is just a square shape, that's sufficient. If you have an odd shape, element shape will work. Click OK. It looks like nothing happened. Well, you have to have the text box below the element that it's wrapping around. So the next thing I see is it's really close to him. I don't like that. So I'm going to go back into this photograph, drop down menu, properties, and space around the element. I can play around with, say, a 1/16 of an inch. That's still a little too close. 3/16. That's not bad. I don't know if I like how that hits right there. 1/4 of an inch. I think I like that best at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. So that's one way to make it automatically do what it wants to do. I'm kind of a control freak. I've learned, I'm going to undo. So I'm going to keep that at the top because it really doesn't matter. It can be at the bottom of the screen, the top of the screen. But I have found that I like to play around with things and make them do exactly what I want them to do. So this is something a little bit more of the intermediate, I don't know if you call it advanced technique, but you can right click on your text box, shape, edit shape. Every time you put your cursor over this line, if it turns blue, anywhere you click, you can create a new dot. Now, I accidentally moved that when I clicked on it, so that is something that can happen. But I will typically go ahead and click where I want it to be in reference to the left side here. And I'm going to, when that turns blue, I can click one here. So I want to make sure that I don't go any higher than that. And then I can grab this one that's existing. So you notice when it's blue, I can add a point. When it turns into a pointy finger, I can grab that dot and I can move that down and I can just kind of eyeball where I want that. I don't like where that is. If I just raise that a little bit and raise this a little bit, I can bring some text over there. Click OK, take a look at it. I can always grab this and I can just take my arrow key and make that go a little bit further away from his picture, but there you go. So here I have a shape in the form of a flower. I can, again, go into the element, properties, bounding box is what I chose with the first one. Click OK. And remember the text needs to be below. And you can see it's very squared off. If that's the way you like it, that's a design choice. In this instance, I think I'd rather it be a little bit more rounded. So I'm going to go back into my element, shape, go to properties. This time I'm going to choose element shape. And you see how it's now defaulted to more of a round look. I can play with the size right here, the space around the element. I'm going to go ahead and leave that for now. But anywhere I move it, you see how the text will move around it. So it's not perfect. There seems to be more space on the left than the right, but you can find a happy place where it looks the way you want it to look. If that was my text box, of course, it's going to be a little bit different since I just used the same thing over and over again, but it'll have that feel of being wrapped around it. So that's one way you can do that. I'm going to go in here, properties, and I'm going to say no text wrapping. What I can do is I can click on my text box, right click, shape, edit shape. When I hover over a line, it turns blue. When that happens, if I click on it, it creates a little dot. And in that instance, I moved it a little bit. That does happen at times. So I can say, I want things to start here, and now I'm going to grab this little guy and move it over, hover over this. I can create another one. I can pull it over, hover over that, and I can play around with it until I get it exactly the way I want it. Maybe I want that a little bit closer. Maybe I want things to be a little bit more perfectly shaped. You can play around with it. When you're done, click OK. If you're still not happy with it, go back in, right click, shape, edit shape. Wherever you have a dot, you grab it, you can move it. So this is one way to make it exactly the way you want it to be. If you're kind of a perfectionist like me and you get kind of annoyed that, when I do this, my text is doing wonky things, like it starts way over here. If I keep pulling it up, eventually it's going to come all the way to the left. I've got it pretty straight right there. But if you click on a ruler, it's going to create a ruler that you can see how this dot is higher than that one. If I want to be really exact, I can use that ruler. Same thing going this direction to make sure that I'm pretty much on track. Some of it is just real visual. Nobody's going to really notice at the end, but if it helps to have it precise, use your rulers. If I right click, remove all tabs, right click, remove all tabs, that goes away. So that helps me make this as perfect as I want it. I'm going to go over to this one. This is a good example of why I might want to have something shaped around, or a text box shaped around an element. So I'm going to right click on this. So if you've worked on this and you hate it, go into shape, remove. It goes right back to a rectangle for you. So I'm going to right click, click on it once, right click, shape, edit shape. Remember, when you hover, then you can create a dot. And I'm going to go ahead and put a dot here. I find it's easier to make sure that I have somewhere here that keeps it where I want it to be, so that when I move this over, I didn't lose this. It didn't get really wonky. So I'm going to hover, it turns blue. I can make a dot and I can pull that over where I want it, try to be as straight as I can. Let's click on this again, create another one, come in here. Create another one, come down here. Whoops. I accidentally did a right click. So there's an example of how you can have it going around an element. Now, of course, I could always have it up here, but when I'm reading something, it makes it a little hard to go, I'm reading from here and going to here, and then going here, and there's something in the way. I find it's easier to just have that blank. If I go here, I'm on a dot, I right click on it, I can delete that point. So if you end up with a bunch of dots you don't want, you can always just click on it, delete the point. So hopefully that gives you an idea of some things you can do. Maybe I want to tighten that up a bit. I'm going to click on it again, right click, shape, edit shape. And I'm going to just pull this down until my text comes in. Maybe I want that a little closer. So I've tightened it up a little bit. And I have this where it's not even. There we go. Okay. So there, I tightened it up even more. So you can get it as close as you want. You can shape it to whatever you want. I just find this gives me a little bit more control over my text box. So play with that. Let me know if you have any questions and have some fun with this. Talk to you soon.